Ms. Monroe, the criteria and the reasons for the sentence is the nature and the gravity of this offense, the punishment or discipline to you that is appropriate, the potential for your rehabilitation or reformation, the protection of society and deterrence against you or someone else committing this offense again.
On May 18th, 2024, a family gathering in Watertown Township, Michigan turned into a scene of absolute carnage. Ashley Marie Monroe, while driving with a blood alcohol level of .195, nearly 2.5 times the legal limit, and on prescription medication, plowed her SUV into a group of 16 family members walking to a park. Among the victims were Jonathan Esch, a dedicated paramedic and firefighter, and his brother-in-law, Daniel Harris. Today, we're looking at the heavy hand of justice as a Michigan judge delivers a sentence that reflects the sheer gravity of this tragedy.
First of all, I would like to thank all of the individuals from the family who spoke today, everyone, and I'll just briefly recap what each person said. Ms. Evans testified about the fear that she had when she realized she had been involved in this accident for herself, for her daughters. Ms. Pack, who bravely came up and spoke about, again, her fears with this terrible incident. Captain Tiefel, who spoke on behalf of the Firefighters Union, talking about losing a brother that day in John, and he made a statement that was particularly poignant to this court. He said, and this is from the captain, that you, Ms. Monroe, took away someone who would have moved heaven and earth to help people, and that was his brother, his firefighter brother, John, who worked as a paramedic, and as we've heard his wife and other people talk about, really seemed to connect with the most vulnerable people in society and really fight on their behalf to make sure that those people were properly cared for medically when they themselves were having their own issues. And Ms. Monroe, it sounds as if had the situation been different, and he would have cared for you too in that incident. We heard from Dr. Blatz, the widow of John, who, again, she talked about how her husband would sit and talk with patients that he dealt with as a paramedic, who offered no judgment to those people, who even if those people who were constantly slipping in and out of addiction, needing the services of emergency medical personnel, and yet he would still tend to those individuals, as was his obligation and his job, and frankly, as Dr. Glatz indicated, his desire as a paramedic professional to help the community in the manner he did. We heard from Mrs. Ash, John's mom, who talked about the kindness of her son and how he cared for others, and that was exemplified in everyone's statements today about John and Dan, and how again, this family has lost such a great deal in losing these two men, and having other members of the family, including the youngest members, be injured, and what it sounds like facing a long and painful road to recovery. We heard from Ms. Fabrice, who talked about her 2-year-old who had to endure and is apparently still going through the symptoms of PTSD, who had to seek out counseling, who the family has had some challenges with depression and feeling like they themselves were responsible for this, since the day that this happened, they were gathered to say goodbye to their family, their small family, who was taking another job overseas. And we heard from Mr. Ash, from John's brother, who really eloquently said, in addressing you, Ms. Monroe, what you're getting today is nothing like what our relatives have been going through for the past 515 days. So in other words, the sentence today, and I think other families...
Microphone commentarivo. One of the most heartbreaking realities in cases like this is that prison sentences eventually end. But for victims and survivors, the emotional sentence often lasts a lifetime. The memories, the trauma, and the unanswered questions never truly disappear.
Members said this. This family is going to have to live with the memories of this terrible, terrible, tragic day for the rest of their lives, whether it's from their own memories of the incident, of the crash, of themselves, their family being injured and killed. A number of these family members have talked about reliving those moments in their lives and not being able to see a day where they don't either experience the physical pain or the mental pain of reliving those moments. Mr. Esch also talked about the fact that, again, the powerlessness of himself not being able to help some of the victims, while his wife, on the other hand, was performing CPR in a failed attempt to revive her brother-in-law. And again, I think that it went without saying that this was one of the best days. This day started out as one of the best days in this family's lives. Family traveling from out of state, from out of the area to meet, to say goodbye for now to Monica and David, who would be moving overseas, and their young daughter, enjoying time outside in the sun. And I do remember that this was a beautiful day outside. They were gathered in the park to enjoy, and I think someone said playing in the same playground that some of the family members played in when they were young children, and just enjoy each other's company. And it became the worst day of this family's life. We heard from Mrs. Harris, Dan's wife, who talked again about her own horrific injury, her own struggle for survival. We heard the prosecution say they originally thought this might be a 3-count homicide case, but through her own persistence and desire to carry forward, despite her husband's death, she survived. And we heard her struggles, and we heard Aurora's elocution about losing her dad. Well, we heard again statements from the family, and I'm just compiling them here. They will never be able to live normal lives again. And at the end, once all the family members had made their statement, the prosecution, Ms. Martinez, said she has wondered, why do things like this happen to people like this? People that were just out enjoying their time together. And really, I don't think there's a good answer to it. But what we do know is that Ms. Monroe, the defendant in this case, made what I understand to be the worst choice that she's ever made in her life. She made the choice to, while on prescription medication, consume a very large amount of alcohol to the point where her blood alcohol level was, as has been stated, 0.195.
Now let's talk about why this is second-degree murder and not just so-called drunk driving causing death. Under Michigan compiled laws section 750.317, second-degree murder requires so-called malice. Now, usually we think of malice as wanting to kill someone, but legally it also includes a quote-unquote depraved heart or a quote-unquote reckless disregard for human life. Well, when you combine a .195 BAC with prescription meds and then get behind the wheel of a multi-ton vehicle, the law argues you should have known that death was a very likely result of your actions. That so-called wanton and willful disregard is what transforms a tragic accident into a murder charge.
Way more than anyone should be consuming and then making the choice to step behind the wheel of a vehicle and then operate that vehicle and unfortunately crash into this family. And I agree with Ms. Martinez's sentiments that many miracles happened this day, and it is a miracle that we are not here mourning the losses of more of these family members. And it's funny because Ms. Martinez...
Microphone comenterivo. The judge's comments highlight something powerful. Even in unimaginable tragedy, acts of heroism emerged. Several victims reportedly shielded loved ones and tried to save others in the chaos. Their final actions may have prevented an even greater loss.
About the fact that out of all of the family members that were present for this, again, what should have been a joyous gathering of these family members, the two people who perished, from what the family has stated about those two people, those are the two people that would have sprung into action to protect their kids, their nieces, their nephews, their wives, their mothers, and you know, I guess, and I of course didn't know any of these people personally, but from the statements made, they displayed acts of heroism that, again, most likely reduced this incident from something that could have been even more tragic than it already is. So again, Ms. Monroe, I'm sure that if you could dial back this incident, and you know, you didn't make a statement, and I don't hold that against you in any way, but I'm sure that if you could dial back this incident, you would. But unfortunately, you can't. And as all of these individuals, all of these family members said, they are going to have to deal with and the consequences and the ramifications of your actions for the rest of their lives. And I don't know that there's an explanation for what happened other than your choices that day. But I do know that something like this cannot happen again. Not here in this community, not here in Clinton County, not here in the state of Michigan, not ever. And so I do need to sentence you to a sentence that will not allow that to ever happen, not allow you to make these same choices again. I have reviewed the recommendation that's been provided to this court from the Michigan Department of Corrections. I believe it is in line with what the plea agreement is. And once again, I note that your sentencing guidelines permit me to sentence you from somewhere between 18 years to 31 years on the minimum, up to a longer term. And the recommendation provided to me by the Michigan Department of Corrections accounts for, yes, your criminal history, which you do not have any criminal history to speak of, but it also accounts for the horrific acts that occurred on this day on May 18th, 2024. And their recommendation for the homicide murder second degree charge is 30 years to 60 years with credit for 515 days served.
That is a massive sentence. Michigan uses what's called indeterminate sentencing, which means that the judge sets a minimum and a maximum. Monroe must serve every single day of that 30-year minimum before she is even eligible to look at the parole board. And since she's 36 years old, she will be in her mid-60s before she even has a ghost of a chance at freedom. The judge followed the so-called Killebrew argument here, which is a Michigan-specific term for a plea deal where the judge agrees to a specific sentencing cap. Despite her lack of prior criminal history, the sheer number of victims, 16 in total, means that the court had zero appetite for leniency.
And I intend to follow that recommendation. So as to the count 9 homicide murder second degree, I sentence you to the Michigan Department of Corrections for a period of 30 years to 60 years with credit for 515 days served. You must pay the court costs in the amount of $350. You must comply with DNA testing and pay a $60 fee as ordered. You must pay a $68 state cost. And this will be served concurrently with all of the other counts. This is count 1 through 8 of operating while intoxicated, causing serious injury. You will serve that sentence in the Michigan Department of Corrections for a period of 2 years to 5 years with credit for 515 days served. Those counts will be served concurrently with each other and concurrently with the second degree homicide sentence that I just handed down. You will not have any verbal, written, electronic, or physical contact with any of the victims in this particular case, and all of the victims' names are listed in the pre-sentence investigation report. You will not have that direct contact or be within 500 feet of their residence, school, or place of employment. You must pay restitution in the amount of $73,128.44. $66,093.44 will be payable to Auto Club Insurance Association. $7,035 will be payable to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and you must execute a wage assignment to pay restitution if you are employed and miss 2 regularly scheduled payments. You must pay $544 in state costs, comply with DNA testing, and pay attorney fees as ordered. And these fees will be determined. So I want to say one more thing as to your sentence with the Michigan Department of Corrections. This does not, again, not to minimize any of the family members who came in here and talked about the fact that for the rest of their lives they will relive the moments of this tragedy. But Ms. Monroe, I know you are going to a place, and I noticed in your pre-sentence investigation report, and I also noticed, but based on some of the certificates that you presented the court, that you do have, and I think it's obvious, a substance abuse issue that is the reason, one of the reasons why this terrible thing happened. I implore you to take advantage of any possible rehabilitation that might be offered to you within the correctional facility that you will be sent to, and you have a long time to serve, and I implore you to serve it wisely by making sure that this never happens again, and that no one else, and that this sentence deters anyone else from engaging in this type of reckless conduct. So with that said, you will be handed a document that notifies you that if you wish to appeal this sentence, you may do so by sending the one copy of the document to the address listed on the form no later than 42 days from today. The other copy of the form, it's the same form, 2 copies, will be returned to me, and I'll place it in the court file. And I would ask you to initial that copy. Do we need to address anything else from the people?
Briefly, Your Honor.
Sure.
Mr. Belfast from the Department of Corrections just notified me that on the position that.
Yes, Your Honor. I noticed it was admitted for the crime victims assessment, $130. It's mandatory.
Okay, that will be included then. $130 for the crime victim. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Anything else that we need to address from the defense?
Your Honor, we'll just acknowledge receipt of the notice of appellate rights, and the client initial and date that and provided it back to the court. She's receiving her copy now. Nothing additional from defense.
All right, thank you very much.